Hey, welcome to a Wiser Retirement podcast. Leaving a financial legacy isn't something that happens by accident. It takes planning. We've put together a guide with 7 steps to leave a financial legacy and have made it available for free on our website. This guide covers designing your legacy, estate planning, financial education, and protecting your legacy. The link to download 7 steps to leave a financial legacy is listed in the episode description, or you can go to wiserinvestor.com, scroll to the bottom, and find it there. Now on to today's episode.
Welcome to a Wiser Retirement Podcast. We believe the best financial advice should always be conflict-free. I'm your host, Casey Smith, and today we are joined by guest Nick Rosenbauer, estate planning attorney at Rosenbauer Law Office. He is the host of his own podcast called the Complete Estate Planning Podcast. Today we're going to talk about estate planning for young adults. Hey, Nick.
Hey, how are we doing, Casey? It's a happy Friday, right?
That's right. Thanks for doing this with me. It's a small world. Hadley, our marketing guru here, she connected us since we both had podcasts, and our theme this quarter is legacy planning. But in addition to that, you're in my family's neck of the woods up in Ohio. I grew up in Georgia, but my dad and his family grew up in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I'm a Kentucky boy. But Northern Kentucky, like I have all my teeth. I don't really think I have an accent. And
Right.
There were no cars on blocks in our front yard, although one street over, like we weren't far from that growing up. And then I moved up to Ohio, went to University of Dayton for law school, and that's where I met my wife. So we've been there ever since. I'm a convert, been an Ohio guy for the last about 15 years or so.
If our listeners ever make their way up to Ohio or in Ohio and haven't done it already, Wright-Patt Air Force Base has one of the best museums, Air Force museums. They have a complete collection of former Air Force Ones.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. 2 weeks ago, it was a crummy, kind of a rainy Sunday. So I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, and we took them, and it's free, by the way. It doesn't cost to get in, and it is massive. So Wright-Patt Air Force Base has its own zip code. That's how massive the Air Force Base is. And the museum, I think it has 7 or 8 different Air Force Ones, and you can even go up some of the newer ones. You can go up and walk through them.
Yeah.
Like I went up with my son a couple weeks ago. We went into the one where, and they even had a little plaque that said, "This is the row of seating that was taken out for Kennedy's casket when it was flown home." Yeah,
they have the what airplane is that? That was the 707, I believe. They were flying at that time as Air Force One. Yeah, I remember that. I remember walking through that as a kid. Did it still have the plexiglass up where you got shocked as you walked through it?
Well, in the wintertime, when there's the static, yes, they have the plexiglass up. But yeah, you can see all the seating and like the little tables, and like there's even a little presidential desk that's still there with the old rotary phone and everything like that. But all of that, it's fantastic. They have a whole lot of the intercontinental, like the ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
Like if you've seen those, and those are, 50 feet up in the air, in the rocket ships. But yeah, it's fantastic. The kids love it.
LBJ's Cessna 150 painted, little tiny airplane painted in Air Force One colors. He flew on his ranch. I thought that was hilarious.
That's funny. We only got to do a couple different exhibits because the 6-month-old, it was past his nap time. But no, it's fantastic. It's still up, and it's free. I always donate because, my goodness, if we can do all this fun stuff for free, and it's worth a lot of money to entertain both of my kids when it's raining.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump right into it. I know our listeners want to hear more about museums. I know where all the best museums are, but that's a different podcast.
Right.
So let's talk about estate planning for young adults. It's amazing that so many young people think oh yeah, I probably should do that. Or most like some of them think, oh, I'll have to do that when I get older, because you never think you're going to die at 18, 30, or 40, you know? Um, so, you do a lot of this work. Who do you think can be affected by not
Well,
having,
first off, the thing to think about is, yeah, obviously, when I was 18 years old, I assumed, well, I'm not going to die for at least 50 years. So, um, what I've heard people described is they'll say it's important, but it's not urgent. Like it's not something that I need to worry about now. They don't say I don't need to do it, but a lot of people will say, I got time, to get to it. And I'm sure you have a lot of people, if you talk to a 20-year-old who said, I know I need to save for retirement, but it's not mission critical yet.
right?
Okay. So that's kind of the analogy that I like to use. But obviously something can happen to someone at any age. Certainly you hope it doesn't happen, but selfishly, first off, if something happens to you, um, someone needs to be able to make decisions for you and step in if you got sick, if you were in a car crash, something bad like that happened, and you can't speak for yourself. Someone needs to be able to do it. So I always start with the selfish part of it. And then for those people who are married or have a partner, well, if I get sick tomorrow, my wife needs to be able to carry on, make decisions, if, talk to the doctors, decide what to do with me, that sort of thing. And that's assuming I don't die. If I die, how does she make sure that she gets the inheritance, which, we're married. So I'd say it's our money. So why does she have to fight to get what's hers? And sometimes this could even include, joint or shared assets, depending if it's set up the wrong way. And, even if she'll get all of it, all these hoops she has to jump through. And then one other thing, and obviously every state's different, but if there are stepchildren involved, so it's a second marriage, sometimes the spouse is not entitled to everything. So
Yeah.
I've had situations where husband dies and then wife is fighting it out in court with the stepkids over who gets how much. And I had one situation where the wife had to buy out the stepkids' share of the house just to stay in her own house. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So people don't think about this stuff, but if it happens, you'll be in a world of hurt. And then people who aren't married. So I have people talk to me, we're engaged. What do we do? Well, some people say don't combine finances or anything until you're married, but if you're basically married, or what if you were going to get married, but then your wedding got canceled because of COVID, but the house is in joint names and, the accounts are in joint names, you run into all the same problems, but you don't have there's certain legal rights that you get as a spouse. It's not great, but basically there's certain things that'll default till you'll get first bite at the apple. And if you're not married, all of that goes away. So you're nothing more than a live-in, boyfriend, girlfriend, or couch surfer at that point. So you don't have rights to anything. And then you end up fighting with the blood relatives. So the siblings or parents or what have you to try to get something, even though, legally nothing's going to you. So if you're unmarried, it actually kind of makes it worse. And that's just the adults. Obviously, Casey, if we have kids involved, everything's totally different. So I have a 3-year-old and one who's 6 months. What about the guardians? Where do the kids go? Even if I don't have a dime to my name, need to make sure that I'm picking the guardians instead of leaving the local probate court to decide who takes them. And a lot of times they end up in foster care or child protective services in the short term because no one has the rights to them. So things like that can get hairy and can be, god awful for the kids, on top of the fact that they just lost their parent. And then, also, if it's not a spouse who's going to be handling it, you got to think of who's going to step in and begrudgingly clean up the mess. Who's going to be the one who goes to the probate court, gets turned down, and then realizes he or she has to go meet with a high-priced attorney. And if that's a sibling or a parent, someone's going to end up, gritting their teeth or being, voluntold by the family to kind of clean up the mess. And, if they have nothing to go off of and they have to basically apply for every job and get court approval, it's a mess for you, and it's a mess for whoever counts on you or relies on you that you leave behind. So, it's a selfish thing and it's a selfless thing to do.
When I was in high school, I had a friend, her dad passed away. Make it complicated, I think he was overseas. It took a congressman to get him home.
Wow.
Heart attack. And the assets were divided amongst her and her mom and her sister. And there was no step situation involved at all. These are all normal families, right? And so it was, I just remember at a very young age that it kind of stuck with me that, man, you got to make sure you have a will or something, trust or something in place that avoids that, because in that case, it was a loving family. So everyone just passed everything back to mom. But I could totally see in a dysfunctional family where that wouldn't happen at all. If they were young adults, they'd be like, oh, this is mine. Dad left it to me. And then you leave mom without the proper resources to care for yourself, because that mom was a stay-at-home mom. She didn't have a career. So it's that's a firsthand example of why you got to have planning, especially for children. We have clients that do foster care. I don't know that they've had foster care in that particular situation or not. But I know it's never a pleasant situation for a child to end up in foster care, obviously.
No, and it's obviously, I mean, first off, I have family who do who are foster parents, and it is saints work. I'll tell you what, to do it. But at the same time, what do you do with a 2-year-old if mom and dad get in a car crash? They can't just leave the 2-year-old at home alone for 6 weeks before the probate proceeding gets guardians named. So I'm not saying it's ideal, but someone's got to come get the kid right now. And it's usually not who you want. And then even if one of the grandparents or someone dutifully, goes and gets the kids, they have no legal rights to them. A creative person could argue they were just kidnapped. So if there's fighting over it, they say, who said you get the kids?
Yeah. True. So in probate in Georgia takes about 6 months to go through the process.
You're lucky.
I know some states are worse. So with a child's involved, I know that the financial side necessarily wouldn't get sped up. But how fast, like in Ohio, does the child issue get addressed if that were to happen?
Well, the guardianship, you're exactly right. They will fast track that as much as they can. It's still the court system. So
right. Should it be?
Well, and look, I like to rip on lawyers, even though I am one. So, we'll take this for what it is. But normally when you go to court, it takes a long time. It's usually pretty expensive. So, depending on if you have documents in place, like if they have direction from the deceased person, then the process is different. It's not necessarily a job fair of anyone who wants to apply to be the guardian of, Junior here. Here's your notice. We need to send notice to everyone in the family. And, you have to give them time to think about it and hire a lawyer and get ready. It is different if I die and, hey, here's the paperwork from Nick Rosenbauer that is nominating this person as the guardian. So the judge has something to go off of, and the process is more of a, let's make sure that the person Nick chose is proper and they're not, abusive or in jail. So it's basically they're checking over my answers versus, having to figure it out themselves. And again, I would trust my own judgment over, we live in Butler County, Ohio. So the Butler County probate judge's judgment, and no one no one knows me. And then, so it's just when it's contentious and we don't know where we're going, it takes a lot longer. It's better to at least have, here's who I want, and then they get the fast track unless, they're in jail or something, obviously.
Right. I recently learned when you turn 18, not only are you signing up for the draft, but you literally are cut off from your parents, medically speaking. We read recently about a case where an 18-year-old got hospitalized, but the parents weren't allowed to get any information. You think, well, that's my child, but when they're 18, things change. And so there's been a huge push as you go into college to have all these documents prepped and ready to go. The power of attorney, medical directive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds crazy to think put an estate plan together for an 18-year-old. Just sounds like a lawyer trying to make more money, right?
Right. Right.
But, and I'm not saying you need some big complicated thing. I don't even know if I'm worried about the inheritance plan at that point, but exactly right. All of those rights as a parent to make decisions, go to the bank, legal decisions, medical decisions, and then also access information. So find out what's going on more, on top of decision making.
Mhm.
That all goes away because your child is a legal adult. And for those of you listening, I just used air quotes, when I said adult. And so all of a sudden they have their own privacy that is protected by law unless they grant you permission to make decisions, or basically they waive the medical privacy. So we have a young adult program here at our firm. And so I talk to my clients and say, if you have kids or grandkids, they reach 18, they're going off to college, we put the medical directives, the financial power of attorney, and a HIPAA authorization, which is the medical privacy in place to allow most likely a parent, it's almost always a parent,
Yeah.
to be able to make decisions if something happens to the kid, and also get permission, to the doctors or hospitals to communicate, with the parents. If you hear something bad happens and you call the hospital and say, is my son okay?
Right.
So that's all estate planning. That all falls under the umbrella. And I haven't said a word about their inheritance. They might not have $2 to their name. Heck, the car's probably still in the name of their parents.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So what are some of the excuses or myths you think people use to not start this process when they're young?
Well,
And old for that,
everyone.
and old for that matter.
Well, that's true, but I guess first one, it's all relative. But everyone says, "Well, I'm too young," or "I don't need it yet," right? And I know we've already touched on it, but obviously, in Ohio and most states, when you turn 18, you're a legal adult. So all of those, I'm the parent, I get final say, and I'm the parent, you have to tell me what's going on with my child. All of that immediately vanishes. And I'll be honest with you, that when I do that for people, the 18-year-old son or daughter of one of my clients, they don't give a rip. They're not, they're not the ones doing it. But it's not on their radar. But at the same time, the parents, just like you said, are thinking, my goodness, what happens if they're away at school and I can't handle things, or if I can't go to the bank and deposit money?
Right.
So you at least need the basics to make sure you get taken care of if you get sick or you're incapacitated or unavailable. And, if we're being legal about this, I would say once you're 18, then there's no such thing as I'm too young. And then, obviously, I'm sure you deal with this too from your end. People say, well, I don't have any money, or I don't have enough money. And then I think what they're implying is that I don't have enough to where it's worth going through the trouble, right?
Right.
I have nothing to take care of or deal with. So what's the point? What's the plan for nothing? But obviously it's more than just the inheritance plan. Now, the inheritance plan, if you have anything, it's a good idea to say where you want it to go. But I think we it really falls into the last one of, if I get sick, who can go to the bank? Who can pay my bills? If your son is away at college and you need to renew the tags on the car before they expired, can you do that? Not if it's in his name.
Right.
So if you need to change his Verizon phone plan because he's running out of data. Casey, have you ever, I know for us, Verizon's in my wife's name. Good luck calling Verizon or Spectrum or Time Warner Cable, right? And trying to get trying to get anything done if the account's not in your name.
Right.
So something like that. And that's at any age. Theoretically, that could happen. And then obviously, if you have children, guardians, I think is probably more important than anything else, taking care of, the kids who aren't old enough to take care of themselves.
We have you think about young people, they invest a lot differently. Maybe not in significant assets, but you think about like digital assets. They're very comfortable in Robinhood. They're very comfortable in Coinbase or crypto type investments. Again, one, they have a lot of time to make things up and they realize that's probably not the best investment. but and I say that as we actually we just launched a new podcast, the Wiser Crypto, the Wiser Crypto podcast. The Wiser Crypto Investor, if I get the name right. Sorry, there were a lot of variations of it before we launched it, and I think there's certainly a place for it. It's more of an educational type platform. We don't endorse it as a firm, but there obviously there's going to be a future there. I think that buyer beware in a lot of cases, and you have to know what you're doing. But the point is, for estate planning purposes, I mean, we're already reading about people who are early investors in Bitcoin and they lose their key to their wallet, and wasn't there like I think there's somebody with multi-million-dollar estate that they couldn't even get in, right? It's just millions and millions of dollars sitting there and they couldn't get in. How does that work with young people and like crypto and digital assets and estate planning?
Well, a lot of it, frankly, is kind of a brave new world, and we don't know what's going to happen yet. And obviously the law needs to catch up with technology. Okay. The technology comes first, and then the law is like reactionary, obviously. So, first off, what it used to be is the only thing I had to worry about was someone who had a lot of frequent flyer miles. You have 500 million, and what if you had enough for 100 flights?
Yeah. Never even thought about that.
Yeah. Someone who travels a lot, or season tickets.
Yeah.
Right. Like a seat license. So if there's anyone, I'm probably the only one, and you probably don't have any listeners who are big University of Dayton basketball fans. But if there is one out there, go Flyers. But we have something with us, season tickets and your seat license, you can inherit it. Because there's a wait for it. It'll take us like 5 years. My wife and I have 2 seats, and we now have 2 kids, so we want to get 4 seats, and it'll be years before we get them. And frankly, we just need some of the rich donors who have the lower level seats to like die off, and then the kids don't want them, so they open them up.
Right.
But that used to be all it was. But now you have, online bank accounts. Like I think Ally Bank is one of them. There's no bank branch for Ally. I can't go in anywhere. And then social media. Most people, their Facebook or whatever doesn't mean much, but what about a business page? I know you have videos on your YouTube page. There's value to that. How much do you think there's some financial value to Coca-Cola's Twitter account?
Yeah.
Probably worth hundreds of millions of dollars, all the people that follow it. So there's value there. And then obviously you have things like, the cryptocurrencies and things like that. So it's reactionary.
So how how do you handle that? Is it a password list that is, because it's a moving document, right? It's going to change.
Well,
Name and passwords, you just reference it, and this is where I keep it, and it's up to that person, obviously, to do that.
well, there's like there's a few things you can do, and frankly, none of them are that great, or haven't been tested very much, to be honest with you. Like, there's not a whole lot of case law, about an executor suing Coinbase for access to a cryptocurrency wallet. That just, I mean, we have some laws. Ohio has digital asset laws. Most states do, but they're still behind because by the time they wrote them, now new things are coming out. So there's a few
Right.
different things, and this sounds awful, but you do the best you can, and we give ourselves a decent chance. So obviously, first thing you want to do, make sure your attorney is up to date on the state and federal laws, whatever they are. So our state here in Ohio, we have, there's laws within our probate code, our trust code, and our power of attorney laws, have digital asset language that's been added into them in the last few years. So my financial powers of attorney give the power of attorney specific ability to access digital assets, online accounts, things like that. And we make the language as broad as we can, because I'm sure 10 years from now, there's going to be something that I can't even imagine right now. And then also we put things in after someone dies that says the executor or trustee, has the specific authority to access, manage the content, and then either pass on or close the accounts.
Yeah,
Now,
I just thought of something else. You think about non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and people are spending millions of dollars on digital art, essentially, and the ownership is to them. So yeah, how do you handle that?
well,
That's beyond a passcode at that point.
yeah. And it's not like a Fidelity account where you can just fill out the Fidelity beneficiary form,
Right. Yeah. I know, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Um,
I'm sure someone's thought about that on their side, but yeah, you don't hear about it.
no. And then also, even like Robinhood, and some of these online, even like just traditional bank account or brokerage accounts, some of these companies do not have a beneficiary option. I don't want to
Yeah.
badmouth them,
Like
but
a payable on death option. Yeah.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah. Correct.
they don't allow you to designate what happens when you die, which
Right.
is ridiculous. But so you have to do a couple things. Make sure your attorney has the documents as good as possible, as up to date as possible. Although secondarily, and I think Facebook was one of the first to do this, they have things where you can log into various accounts and set up like a digital executor or someone who legally can access the account if you pass away. Now, many places don't, but I know Facebook and some of the other ones allow that. So that's a good thing to do. And then, if it's an account with money, like a bank account or something, if you can set a beneficiary, that's always great. Although not everywhere allows you to do it, but do it where you can. I know these crypto wallets and things like that, they don't let you do it. And I think a lot of them, aren't some of them anonymous?
Yeah.
Like who owns them? So I can't even prove that I own it. So how the heck can I set a beneficiary, or how can my executor, demand that it gets turned over to my estate when I'm gone if you can't even prove that it's mine to begin with?
Yeah.
We don't know what to do with that, honestly. We have
I guess
no idea what to do.
Whoever has the key in the end, and I'm not the expert on that. My good friend Robert is, and that's on the Wiser Crypto Investor podcast. But and I'll probably have to bring that up on our next topic, actually, because I have questions about that too. But ultimately, I think it comes down to you can access any of that stuff Well, I don't know. It gets complicated. Before you could just, as long as you have a list of passcodes, and this is not. My mom keeps it in this notebook, and it's so annoying. She has to write it in, and but she's not tech savvy enough to use like LastPass or 1Password. But ideally, you want to use LastPass. It's an app. You make sure your passwords all be like squigglies and random letters. It's not, the cat's name or the dog's name, with a one or an exclamation point at the end. Or 1Password is another good app that I've used in the past. And then you leave the master login for that, and that has all your logins.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's really clean. But what gets more complicated though is even with LastPass or 1Password, a lot of the apps that I use or websites that I use require an authenticator on my phone, right? So then I might have the username and password, but then I have to have the authenticator app on my phone, or at a minimum, two-factor authentication. So if I die, don't turn my phone off, because that's where you're going to get the two-factor authentication to go to, right? So it gets very complicated.
Well, you're exactly right. And I was going to say, this isn't ideal, and I don't even know how legal it is, but I always tell people a master list of logins and passwords is a great idea. It's helpful. My wife and I, we use a password protected Microsoft Word document that's in a Dropbox that we share.
Yeah.
Not ideal. I haven't looked into the apps yet.
You're young enough, Nick. You can use LastPass or 1Password.
No, I mean, despite I appreciate that. I guess I'm an old millennial, but I don't think I count, because our first computer in our house ran DOS. Okay, so we had a computer growing up, but I sure as heck didn't use it. But so the password thing is good, and then also you talk about this extra security. That's one of the reasons I put very specific language in my documents saying they can access email accounts, because what about a login or two-factor authentication, like to my Gmail account?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of these say, do you want us to text or send an email?
Right.
For me, if you can get into my Gmail account, you're golden. If you can't, you're in big trouble. And it hasn't had a whole lot of testing as far as like, if my client died tomorrow and I called up Google and said, hey, here's the section of the document that says the executor has access to the deceased person's Gmail account, hand it over. The law is kind of on our side here, but it's untested. And I don't know what would happen if Google said no way.
Yeah.
Like it's that new. And what do we do about it? Frankly, do you sue Google to try and get in?
I mean, for most estates, that's not worth it. They're banked much deeper than your estate.
Yeah. So even when you're right and the language is correct, it's going to be really hard to win or to get there.
Yeah.
Which is scary, which is why I say have the password list. Now, there's obviously identity theft things to worry about there.
Sure. Well, ultimately, I think what I'm hearing from you is it's a two-pronged approach. One, you got to have a legal document that gives you authorization in a power of attorney. It's a power of attorney. Inside the power of attorney, it gives you authorization to get into access to all digital assets and digital accounts. And then the more common sense way is you're leaving your loved ones with the passcode to access all the username and passwords. So it's really a two-pronged approach, because they'll have to use that. In that case, they could use that POA, but only if they absolutely had to, from a digital asset standpoint or digital access standpoint.
Well, right. And then also, and not to get ethical here, but if I have documents that say if I die, my wife has the legal authority to access all my online and digital accounts, I could make a good argument that she's doing nothing wrong by using my passwords to log in.
Yeah.
Because she has the legal authority in a document to do it. In case you want it in the power of attorney, and also it's known as a testamentary document. So whether it's a will or trust that says when I die, my representative for my estate So
Right.
you want it both ways.
Yeah, the power of attorney is for when we were alive,
Yeah.
and then the will is for after you've deceased.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. Let them in, but give them legal authority to stand on, in order to kind of help them get in. And obviously, Casey, 10 years from now, there'll be case law. This will all have changed, or it will have at least, come out in the wash, and we'll know what we're dealing with. But it is kind of the wild, wild west from that standpoint.
That's yeah, that's very interesting. So I think ultimately, um, once you turn 18, you need to have some form of basic estate planning done, and that should be fairly straightforward when they're that young. When you have kids, there's no option. Like, how often are a husband and wife together without kids? Probably not as much as we would like. But husband and wife are are typically, they drop the kids off the grandparents' house, they go to the movies or something, and they tragically die in a car accident. And with no estate planning, that could go really wrong. That could go really wrong.
Yeah,
Especially if you have two loving grandparents. Imagine them fighting each other who's going to take the kids.
Well, it happens. And sometimes they don't even mean to fight. But, let's say my sister and her husband died tomorrow and they had no plan. My wife and I would, just out of obligation, say, we'll take their kids. We have room, we have the house, we'll take them.
Right.
But my guess is my dad would also, out of obligation, say, I'll take them because I'm grandpa. And I'm sure my brother-in-law's family, out of obligation, would say the same. And now we all show up in court looking at each other, and it turns into, I'm the best option, Your Honor, because I'm better than everyone else. It's like a group interview where people end up turning on each other. So there's nowhere good that's going to end up.
Yeah, very true. So it's in your practice, are you seeing any increase in younger people looking for estate planning, or do you think it's just kind of the same it's always been? Because I feel like for whatever reason there's more attention to it these days. I'm not sure why.
It's actually really encouraging. I have a lot of younger clients, I would say under age 40. It seems like the trigger is when they have kids. I don't have, I think as soon as you get married, someone counts on you. It's a good idea. But once you have kids, you have a baby who literally relies on you to live. Changes everything. I see a lot of it where someone has a kid or they get pregnant, the first kid's on the way. I have a lot of, young clients, young professionals. They're the ones who are the handlers, cover everything ahead of time. The non-procrastinators who want to get all their ducks in a row, and they responsibly look down and say, my goodness, while they're rocking baby to sleep, say, what would have happened if something happened to us when we went out on our date night, while grandma was watching, Nick Jr. here.
Right.
So I think it's encouraging. COVID, I think, has been a lot of it, regardless of what you think about COVID, it has,
because people around you had passed away. So that and
they're talking about it. And obviously, people have died. It seems like for some people it's been really nasty, and for some people it hadn't been a big deal at all.
Right.
COVID for me was great, actually, because I never got sick and I had to stay in the basement. We got a treadmill there, so I didn't have to mess with the kids or change any diapers. I didn't. But I think I think COVID has just brought some things from maybe number 10 on the priority list up to number 4 or 5. And we're seeing it with a lot of young professionals, people who worry about the what if with the kids and say, let's get this done now so I don't have to worry about, my kids being in trouble. So a tough thing that brought it to the top of the list, but I think it's a good result that people are getting their I's dotted and their T's crossed.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you for coming on A Wiser Retirement and If you want to hear more from Nick, take a look at his the Complete Estate Planning podcast. You can listen to that anywhere you can find a podcast, pretty much. Nick, I enjoyed it. Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Casey.
Thanks for listening to a Wiser Retirement podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, that way you don't miss any new episodes. We would also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, head to wiserinvestor.com and reach out. We would love to hear from you. This episode was produced and edited by Lilton Moore.